The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have two members, one from the Senate and one from the House, representing primarily Hanover County, but other jurisdictions as well. Senator Ryan McDougle, good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Woody.
Delegate Buddy Fowler, good to see you again.
Thank you for the invitation, Woody. Pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, I know you are the newest member of this duo. What kind of expectations do you have for this very short session? Some people say, let's just get the budget done and go home.
Well, certainly one of my expectations is that we're going to get out of here on time. And the second expectation is that at the end of the day, as you know, we have some budget challenges. Basically closing about a $1.2 billion shortfall. But I know I'm pretty confident at the end of the day we're going to balance the budget, and that we're going to do so without any increase in taxes and fees. So again, that would be my macro expectation for the session.
Great. And Senator, what about you? You heard the governor's remarks Wednesday night. Were there any surprises there?
I was kind of disappointed in the governor's political tone that he set on Wednesday night. He talked about being bipartisan, and then he proceeded to say how many vetoes he had against bills that had passed both houses of the legislature. Not what you say if you're really trying to be bipartisan. I do think, as Buddy said, we're going to focus on the budget. We've been spending a lot of time there already. Last week we had public hearings all across the state to listen to what citizens had concerns about specific items that either were or were not in the budget. We started committee meetings over the last couple weeks of subcommittees. Even before the session started, I had called two committee meetings of the Public Safety Senate Finance Subcommittee to talk a lot about what to do with some critical issues, including compensation for our state police officers and for our deputies in Virginia. They are very important to the work of public safety, and we need to make sure that we are supporting them through their salaries. But I think the job is going to be difficult, but doable. It means that we're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions that are not always fun to make, but we will make them. The great thing about us being a part-time legislature, and certainly part-time legislative compensation, is that we have to deal with everything that we pass or don't pass. So we're in the community. We hear the concerns and questions that people raise. We have to deal with them in our individual businesses that we operate and participate in year-round, and I think that helps us come to better solutions. So we're going to look at some other policy things. I think we'll talk about them in a few minutes, but the budget will be the number one item, and clearly where we're spending the vast majority of our time already.
And Delegate Fowler, in terms of reasonable compensation for our state police force and other law enforcement, I understand the state is actually losing people to other states because the salaries are not commensurate here.
That's correct, Woody. You know, back before the session, I had the privilege to sit in on a meeting with a handful of legislators with the state police where we went through a lot of those issues. And again, speaking from myself, I was somewhat embarrassed that we had allowed the situation to degenerate to the point that it has. Obviously, over the years, we've had a lot of, some challenges with balancing our budget. With the economy, as you know, has been kind of rough over the last 8 to 9 years. So it's so we've had to overcome a lot. But that being said, the men and women who put a flak jacket on every day when they go to work, to protect us, they need to be, I think, compensated, fairly and certainly appropriately. And, and I'm very hopeful that the General Assembly is going to address that situation in a substantial way.
And I also know that you've been involved in terms of our veterans, especially those who have lost their lives in action. I know you've been involved with the War Memorial. Talk to us about
Yes,
that.
well, the Virginia War Memorial is a state agency. Again, in the I guess my first year down here, the Speaker of the House appointed me to the board at the Virginia War Memorial. And again, I always tell people, you know, that's where we honor Virginia's heroes. And so I invite people to come down there all the time. We have a lot of different educational programs. You know, it's not just Veterans Day, you know, on Memorial Day at Virginia War Memorial. We have an educational program. We do the DVDs called Virginians at War that I believe are sent to all their public schools. And so for the children can when they're studying their history, they have these DVDs, Virginians at War. And again, I think say the worst crime for a nation to commit is to forget its heroes. So, you know, we at the Virginia War Memorial, you know, are not going to allow that to happen.
Senator, talk to us a little bit more about the budget and how difficult it is to balance, for example, the needs of public safety against transportation, education, health, all of those kinds of issues.
The budget is the most challenging job we have in Virginia. In Virginia, we operate very differently than our friends across the river in Washington, D.C. We have to live within our means. So when we craft a budget, we base it upon what we believe the state revenues will be. If we don't achieve that goal, then we have to reduce our spending because we can never spend more than we take in. A very different principle than what goes on in Washington. It means that we have to make tough decisions. Last year, we put priorities for state police and our sheriff's deputies, law enforcement, but when we did not meet our revenue forecast, those, in addition to all the rest of the compensation for state employees, went away. We're working very aggressively to come to that at least same level for state police and sheriff's deputies in the budget going forward, and we're also working to try to come up with solutions for state employees. We have a couple on the table that the Senate leadership is working with the House leadership in order to try to make sure we can put in the final package, but it's too soon for me to tell you about it yet, but I am very optimistic. One of the things that we're doing very different than the governor is we are going to focus not on new programs, not spending on new areas, but focus on the areas in state government that we know have been successful and make sure that those are funded at the appropriate levels before we go to new areas. Also, so focusing on new employees and bringing in new state employees, focus on compensating the current employees we have for the job that they're doing. And that's a very different approach than what the governor presented in his budget and a different approach than what he laid out last Wednesday night. But I think my colleagues in the Senate and certainly in the House are very focused on making sure we take care of our current employees, focus on the current programs that are doing well before we institute new initiatives.
Now you also have a biennial appropriation act. Talk to us about that and why it's important.
Well, I've been champion for a number of years now, switching the budget years. One of the things of when the governor introduces the budget to the legislature, the things that happens now is the governor will leave their term of office and they will submit a 2-year biennial budget the December before they leave office in January. So less than 30 days before they leave, they'll present a budget package that should be in existence for 2 years. Now the governor that presents that budget, whether they're Republican or Democrat, does not have to live under what they present. They don't have to make any decisions that they bear the consequences of. They just present it and then they're out of office. And I think it puts at a disadvantage the incoming governor. So I would like to switch the years so that when the governor comes into their being sworn in their first term, that they are living under the second year of a biennial budget that gives them approximately 10 months to get up to speed and make the difficult decisions in the budget. And when they propose their second budget, the second 2-year budget, so the third year in their term, they have to live under 1 year of that budget. So they bear the positive and negative consequences of that introduction. But one of the things that my good friends down the hall in the House of Delegates have not agreed to is that bill. But we're going to give them another chance this year.
Actually, it sounds like a good
Hopes-
idea to me.
Yeah. Got one vote.
That's for sure. And of course, you're on the finance committee. And
Yes,
you
sir.
You have to wrestle with all of these issues as well in terms of balancing the budget.
Absolutely. Well, the Finance Committee is a little bit different than in the Senate, where the Senate Finance Committee is both responsible for raising the money and for spending the money. In the House, we have two separate committees. The House Finance Committee has the responsibility for, oversight of the tax code, which is obviously where we raise money for the budget, and then the House Appropriations Committee gets to spend the money. So we kind of joke that the Appropriations Committee has the fun job, and we have to give the citizens the bad news that maybe we got to do something with their taxes. But but again, one of the reasons we've had a challenge with with our budget is because we haven't been collecting the revenues that we the need to spend the money that maybe we'd like to spend on some programs, and it's because the economy is just hasn't been growing fast enough. So again, one of our biggest challenges is getting more people working. So again, more people working means more people they're paying taxes, and then of course our revenue will improve greatly. One of the particular things that we have found is that we have been creating jobs in Virginia, but the jobs we're losing, we tend to be losing higher paying jobs, and we're replacing them with lower paying jobs. So again, it's lower income means lower revenue, lower taxes. So that's a challenge that we're going to have to work through. I'm kind of hopeful that the new administration in Washington is going to hopefully institute some policies, that'll absolutely help with economic growth and some things. And then it'll make Senator McDougle and my job a little bit easier.
To what extent is sequestration still a problem? Speaking about our friends in Washington.
Well, certainly sequestration has been a challenge for us on the state revenue side. The vast majority of state revenues come from two places. Income tax, whether that be what's taken out during your paycheck, withholding, or what you pay quarterly or at the end of the year if you sell property or stocks, call that non-withholding, and then sales tax. So it is largely focused on whether people have jobs where they're earning money and then spending that money in the economy. And sequestration has had a significant impact because not only of Northern Virginia, but also Hampton Roads and the large military presence in Virginia. But we've been working pretty hard to try to find other areas for the economy to be able to expand. A lot in technology. Virginia is certainly one of the leaders in the country, if not the world, in technology. We possess a lot of data here. You might not know that well over 50% of the world's internet traffic actually flows through the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I did not know that.
Securing that through cybersecurity and intellectual property is all very important, and things that we're trying to work to have that sort of technological advancement right here in Virginia, and that is the creating jobs. But I think as Delegate Fowler indicated, we got hit pretty hard with some of the rules that came from the federal health care legislation, and a lot of the jobs that were quote unquote created were part-time jobs where people were doing one job and then they divided that into two part-time jobs. That's not the way to grow your economy, and we're looking for other avenues to do it better.
One of the items that the governor covered Wednesday, which he had covered the year before, as I recall, dealt with cybersecurity and the fact that there are a lot of jobs out there, even for people without college degrees, but with special training. I think he indicated that those kinds of jobs start in the $80,000 range. It's incumbent upon the Commonwealth to help train those youngsters so that they can migrate to those types of jobs.
Well, absolutely. I know that in the last several years that the House and the Senate have we've been looking and spent a lot more time on developing our career and technical education, being able to use the verified credits, because as we know, into the current system to high school graduation, you have to have what they call verified credits, which a lot of times did not recognize some of the career and technical training. So again, that needs to change because again, there are a lot of opportunities out there, you know, for people coming out of high school who decide they don't want to go to you know, seek higher education, but want to enter the workforce. And so again, you know, there's I'd say a significant focus on career and technical education in the General Assembly now, and again, I think that's a good thing.
I don't. You talked about the principle of balancing the budget and how that's required in most states. That's because of state constitutions, is it not?
It is required because of state constitutions. And so we've been very focused on maintaining that. There, certainly, even if it's a constitutional principle, people can live more stringently to that principle or less stringently. In Virginia, we've lived pretty stringently to that. Even our borrowing for capital construction is less than 5% of our budget. So we, I think, do a very good job of managing. It's not our money, it's the people's money, and managing that well as we go forward.
Absolutely.
And of course, that ability to borrow at low interest rates relates specifically to that requirement, but also the fact that the Commonwealth has held the AAA bond rating for how long now?
We've, as long as I can remember.
Since they've had a bond rating, I think. But
So
yeah.
it really does. It not only impacts the Commonwealth of Virginia and state agencies and institutions, but localities that are able to piggyback off of some of that borrowing as well. It means that when people or localities, the state goes to do a project, they can do it cheaper than what they would otherwise be able to do, spread that expense over a number of years, much like you would do your house, or if you purchased a car, spread that out over a number of years. But we can do it economically, at a cost economically way. And so we've been very focused on that as well, making sure that structurally our budget is sound, in addition to not spending more than we have. But it is ever the fight. We have to continue to work in that direction, and certainly on the Senate side, the numbers are close, 21 Republicans, 19 Democrats, so there has to be agreement all the time to move the budget forward. And sometimes governors have different thoughts in the legislature as we try to work through that process. There still does have to be some work across the aisle, whether you're Republican or Democrat, to come up with solutions.
And I guess one of the better examples, at least recent examples, of the ability to borrow at low rates is relating to transportation needs. Now, I know we're doing public-private partnerships as well, but to the extent the state has to borrow money, we're in a good position to do that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you talk about, let's just say your debt service, you know, the less money you have to spend on debt service provides you with more money to spend on K through 12 public education, transportation, public safety, you know, whatever. But I think it's important to note that, and hopefully Senator McDougle will correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the Virginia's debt to GDP ratio compared with the federal government, their debt to GDP ratio is roughly about 100%. I think Virginia's debt to GDP ratio is about 2.5%, I believe. And so that kind of gives you a comparison about, you know, why the federal government's debt service is, I think, basically equal to the entire Pentagon budget. You know, which again, the greater debt you have, then the less options that you have moving forward. So that's why the balanced budget amendment is important.
Talk to us a little bit about, because of your membership of the Finance Committee, any dialogue around the need to really look at the tax code, especially the tax credits. I think there's a bill in now that will put a cap on a historic tax credit, but the problem with a piecemeal approach is you punch one way, something comes out the other way. You've got to replace that revenue.
Absolutely. Well, if every tax credit that we provide in the tax code, that means less revenue that's coming to the Treasury of the Commonwealth. So again, I think the first thing we need to do is make sure that these tax credits are doing what we intended them to do, that they're still actually needed, that they are producing growth to the economy. And so we actually have a committee that's looking through that now, or a commission on tax preferences, I believe it's called. So that's an ongoing thing right now. And so again, I know we've taken a look at for instance, the land preservation tax cuts. We've reduced the cap on that. But again, so yeah, and I think that's a good thing. You know, you shouldn't just do something because that's the way it's always been done. So yeah, we need to always examine the tax credits. And again, being on the Finance Committee on the House side, you know, we've already been warned to not look at a whole lot of new tax credits or anything this year just because of the budget situation, because again, it does have a negative impact on our total revenue.
Changing the tax code, though, is a monumental task, and it's something, again, you can't just do piecemeal. It has to be done all at once, doesn't it?
I think you're exactly right, Woody. It is a monumental task to change the tax code. It's been in existence for a long time. We certainly do need to have that robust discussion. I personally think that discussion has to be during a gubernatorial election in order for there to be the will to move forward, because I might have ideas,
Right.
Buddy might have ideas, but as we do put those ideas into effect, it impacts other people.
Right.
So we bring everybody together, we can have that conversation. One of the things we did do from the legislative side, though, was a couple years ago, we have put sunset clauses on any newly created tax credits that require us every 5 years to go back and look at those, so we can make a determination of whether those were good ideas or bad ideas.
Absolutely.
And certainly they could have been tremendous ideas at the time they were introduced, but technology and business is changing at a rate we've never seen before in history, and our ability to keep up is sometimes challenged. So putting triggers in the budgetary process where we're required to keep up is amazing. Tell you, I have a 5-year-old little girl, Reagan, who is quite precocious. She loves to sit with me, and she tricked me into reading her a bedtime book the other night. It happened to be the Code of Virginia, and so she was planning on not going to sleep at all. But
That's pretty precocious.
Yeah, it is. But one of the things that she's doing now in a preschool on her own is she's learning how to code by just putting different directions together in a system. I would never have imagined even something like that was possible, and here it is, a 5-year-old learning the basic elements of doing that. So by the time she's in college, hopefully, or in business as she goes career technical direction like her grandfather did, then she'll have those skills already in place. And that's what we're really doing for the future. So we're hoping that we can put those triggers in our budgetary process and in our code process that make us look at things so we don't get maybe trapped in the future with doing things the same way because we are automatically looking at them.
And of course, these new technologies present new challenges. Was it last year or year before we had a dialogue and a debate which was resolved to the satisfaction of all parties concerned about Uber and Lyft? Now we have a debate about Airbnb. Is that something that everybody's looking at?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, these days technology is proceeding, I think, a lot faster than lawmakers can keep up with in a lot of cases, and so, you know, and so Uber and Lyft and Airbnb are a great example about that. I think we're still trying to come up with with some legislation to, you know, to I guess codify the the Airbnb at this point. You know, to keep all the stakeholders happy, including local government, who's have concerns about zoning and things like that. But again, this is the new wave of a lot of the economy is in the technology and stuff. So I think it's very important, you know, for policymakers. You know, we're going to need to embrace it because it's coming. You know, whether we like it or not.
And of course, local government sees it as an alternative source of revenue as well, do they not?
Well, the Airbnb issues are one of the disruptor technologies, and they've actually been given a name, and it's in a multitude of different fashions that we're seeing in legislation. But certainly it impacts local government, but it impacts communities and citizens, and it crosses sometimes ideological thought processes. It impacts whether people move into an area and have an expectation of what's happening with their neighbors in the community they live in, but also impacts what a person has the ability to do with their own private residence. So those are items that we need to try to work through and are ones that were never contemplated. We'll come up with solutions, but sometimes they take time. And with the Uber and Lyft issues, those were very contentious. I ended up chairing a subcommittee, and at one point, my little girl was known as saying, she was about 3 at the time, of "I hate Uber Duber," because we kept talking about the bill so much. But we spent literally, in about a week's time, we spent 25 hours in a subcommittee, and not everybody was happy with the results. But we came up with a good product. I expect we'll be able to work toward that same process with Airbnb.
I guess another issue that has to be resolved is the use of drones, for example. I know there's some privacy issues there that are still floating around.
Absolutely, and again, I'm certainly not an expert on drones. I know what they are, but I think there's probably a couple of things going on. Because I believe probably the FAA has has a fair amount of regulatory authority over that, and then I think in Virginia there are obviously concerns about privacy. I think would be the prime issue here. And whether or not what it comes with respect to, search and seizure and those kinds of things. I know that has come up here in Virginia. So, but again, that's just a prime example of technology outpacing, the law.
And I think the committee you sit on, Course of Justice, had quite a discussion about those privacy issues last session.
Well, and it's different whether the government is using the drone or a private citizen is using the drone. The economic benefits of using drones, we've all seen some of the major corporations like Amazon looking about delivery services. My wife ordered something and it arrived at the house quickly enough. I thought it might have come by a drone, but I saw the truck driving away. But those opportunities are present in the challenges that we face too. So as we work through these, they are challenges, and candidly, we don't always have the knowledge of the specific area, so we have to do research and investigate and hear from industry leaders, hear from the community, but those challenges create the opportunity that I think will take Virginia forward in the new economy that we're trying to put together and create those opportunities for our children to not only have new jobs and businesses, but also just the delivery of services will be so different as they continue to grow up than what we've experienced.
Well, look, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know you both have very busy schedules. You've got constituents probably waiting in your offices to talk to, but good luck in this short session, and thank you for being here, Delegate Fowler and Senator McDougle.
Thank you, Woody. We always enjoy our conversations with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Good behavior. All right, we got to dress your cable up.